So here we go. What's the difference between the first film and this one? While the first film was set largely in one house, this film takes place around the greater Los Angeles area and shows more of what happens to the surroundings during the event. Now, the budget on this film was 11 million. The box office was over 111 million. So, literally 10 times the budget. That's good. That's great, actually. What are the percentage ratings and the percentage scores for this movie? Roger Ebert gave it a 50%. Rotten Tomatoes 59. Internet Movie Database 64. Google users 80 to 84. Common Sense Media gave it a 40. And they described it as stronger characters but weaker ideas in violent sequel. The parents gave it an 80, the kids gave it an 80. Now, the Google synopsis right quick, and then I'm going to get into Common Sense Media because it actually this gets pretty interesting. So, one night per year, the government sanctions a 12-hour period in which citizens can commit any crime they wish, including murder, without fear of punishment or imprisonment. Leo, a sergeant who lost his son, plans a vigilante mission of revenge during the mayhem. However, instead of a death-dealing avenger, he becomes the unexpected protector of four innocent strangers who desperately need his help if they are to survive the night. Vigilante? If it's got an E at the end of it, it's vigilante, right? I'm pretty sure it's vigilante. We're going to go with that for right now. Now, Common Sense Media, here we go. A year after the previous event, Americans in the year 2023 prepare for the Purge Anarchy, a night of lawlessness, rampage, and murder that supposedly results in a healthier, happier nation. That's a way of putting it. A waitress and her spunky daughter find themselves attacked in their own home, and a feuding couple are stuck outside after their car breaks down. The vengeance-seeking tough guy winds up rescuing the four of them, reluctantly agreeing to protect them, but remains intent on completing his violent plan. Who will survive when this night is over? Now, is it any good? Whereas the low-budget original film focused on a stressful situation, the sequel seems more interested in sympathetic characters. But the ambiguous theme of the previous movie, the thought-provoking concept of whether the end justified the means, is now gone. The second film is more purely black and white in its thinking. Here, only rich, evil, greedy people participate in the purge. You don't say. The movie brings up some surface platitudes about class inequality and pays homage to more inventive movies, but nothing ventures very deep. Upsetting the balance even more is the camera-shaking quality of James DeMonico's direction. Anytime a chase or a shootout is required, the movie simply turns to mush. Yeah, they could have done a little bit better on that one. So, I think the first movie I gave about a 6.5 at best. So, this film I can bump it up to a 7 because this was a little bit more interesting than the first one. And as they said, the first one took place in just a house. And the second one, there was definitely more action going on. There were definitely more thrills. Roughly the same level of suspense. Let's see. Now here we get to it. Now, families can talk about the Purge's violence. What point is it trying to make? Does the movie celebrate or condemn violence? Now here we go. This is where ChatGPT comes in handy, and this is why I love it. It's my favorite thing ever. If you're not using ChatGPT, I do not know what you're doing with your life. Now, the Purge Anarchy uses extreme violence to make strong socio-political points, but how that violence is interpreted, whether as a condemnation or celebration, depends on the lens through which you view the film. Let's break it down in a structured way. What point is the movie trying to make through violence? At its core, The Purge Anarchy is a critique of systemic inequality, corruption, and violence used as a tool for control. The violence isn't just random, it's targeted, strategic, and loaded with symbolism. Key themes the violence reflects: Class warfare. The poor suffer the most during the purge while the rich are protected or even participate by hunting the poor. That sounds oddly familiar. Government control. The government uses the purge to eliminate the undesirables, poor, minorities, the vulnerable, under the guise of giving people a legal outlet for aggression. Militarization and fascism. Ooh boy. The presence of armed forces purging on behalf of the government suggests authoritarianism hiding behind nationalistic rhetoric. Ooh boy. Oddly familiar. Does the movie celebrate or condemn violence? Now, here's the argument that says the movie condemns violence, meaning that it opposes it and it looks down upon it. It's like it looks at it and says this is bad, this is negative. Now, here are the supporting points to that argument. Moral perspective. The protagonists are mostly people trying to survive, not participate. Even Leo Barnes, played by Frank Grillo, the most violent character, seeks revenge, not thrill, and ultimately chooses mercy. Government as the real villain. The system that legalizes and orchestrates the violence is portrayed as dystopian and tyrannical. I'll tell you right now, if George Carlin were alive, he'd probably love these movies. Violence as oppression. The film shows how violence disproportionately affects the poor and marginalized, and suggesting it is a tool of classist oppression, not liberation. Character arcs. Several characters, Eva, Callie, grow disillusioned with the system, and their survival is not through embracing violence but navigating it. The conclusion is the violence is meant to disturb the audience and provoke anger against the system, not entertain them mindlessly. Now, here's the other argument that says that the movie celebrates violence, meaning that it approves of it and that it supports it. Supporting points. Action-heavy execution. The movie is filled with choreographed gunfights, executions, and set pieces designed for entertainment. The violence is stylized and at times thrilling. Cool anti-hero portrayal. Leo Barnes is presented as a stoic, badass vigilante. This can glamorize vigilantism, and reinforce a fantasy of justified retribution. Lack of consequences. Many violent acts go unpunished or are presented as heroic, which could imply an endorsement of righteous violence. Here's the conclusion to that argument. Some viewers may see the violence as cathartic or empowering rather than a warning. Now here's the other argument. The argument is the movie is neutral or ambiguous. Now here are the supporting points. Satirical intent muddled by genre. While the film tries to be political satire, it also embraces tropes of action and horror cinema. This blend can dilute the moral message. Audience interpretation varies. Viewers' political awareness, tolerance for violence, or familiarity with satire shapes how they read the film. Moral grayness. Even the anti-purge resistance uses violence. The movie complicates the violence is always bad narrative. Now, in conclusion, the film walks a fine line between critique and spectacle, leaving its stance open to interpretation. And I think that probably makes the most sense. And in some ways, you can argue that it celebrates it, but in some ways, it condemns it. Now, here's the final analysis of that. Does it condemn or celebrate the violence? Thematically, it condemns violence, especially systemic, state-sanctioned violence, which stylistically, it risks glorifying it. James DeMonico, the creator of the film, likely intended the film as a satirical horror action piece to spark outrage at inequality and government abuse. However, the presentation of violence, cool action scenes, revenge fantasy, and explosive visuals can blur the message and lead to mixed interpretations. Thought-provoking questions would include, would the film's message be clearer with less stylized violence? Can you use violence in fiction to condemn violence in real life? Does the Purge Anarchy attract viewers who are drawn to the violence rather than the message? Now, here's the other question too. The other question is, does the movie qualify as a horror or a thriller? Me personally, I look at it as a little bit more of a thriller, but the question is, how is it different from or similar to other horror movies? It blurs genre lines. It's primarily a dystopian action thriller with horror elements rather than a pure horror film. Now here's a breakdown of it. The genre classification, thriller or horror. Now, here's the argument that says it's a thriller, strong fit. Okay, actually, you know what? Let me take that back. It's not necessarily an argument. It's saying thriller, strong fit. Suspense driven plot. The story follows several characters trying to survive the night while being hunted across the city. Tension building sequences. The movie thrives on cat and mouse chases, sudden ambushes, and near death escapes. Fast pacing and action. Gunfights, car chases, and urban warfare dominate most of the runtime. Verdict: it's a survival thriller. As a survival thriller, it's spot on. Now, is it horror? Partially. The premise is horrifying. A government sanctioned night of murder is a deeply disturbing idea. Elements of terror, execution squads, mass killers, and abductions are rooted in horror tropes. Atmosphere: dark alleys, abandoned streets, creepy masks, and helpless victims build a horror vibe. Verdict: it flirts with horror, especially psychological horror, but doesn't live there. Is it scary? Jump scares, rare, not a priority. It relies more on tension and dread. Psychological fear, moderate. Gore or brutality, yes. Paranoia, fear of the system, strong. Under jump scares, it says not a. Okay. Psychological fear says the idea of the purge is terrifying. Government enabled murder. Gore or brutality, yes. Not torture porn levels. Not to the level of something like Hostel or Saw or I Spit on Your Grave. It's not, or even Last House on the Left. It's not to that degree, but definitely violent and bloody. Paranoia, the fear comes from how real and possible the premise feels. Bottom line, it's unsettling and intense, but not traditionally scary like paranormal horror or slasher films. So, paranormal horror, talking about like The Conjuring or slasher films like Halloween or whatever. So, comparison to other movies. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of stuff right there. Not going to go into all that. What is the movie's stance on the concept of the purge? What are the arguments for or against it? It takes a clear stance against the concept of the purge as a societal institution, but it does so by showing, not preaching. The film presents both sides through its characters, but its underlying message is a sharp critique of the idea. What is the purge conceptually? A 12-hour window once a year where all crime, including murder, is legal. Justified by the government as a way to reduce crime for the rest of the year, let citizens release the beast, meaning vent aggression, cleanse society of its undesirable members. I was trying to say clean and cleanse at the same time. The movie stance is against the purge. Arguments for the purge: crime reduction, economic efficiency, freedom and catharsis, patriotic duty. Arguments against the purge: class warfare, state sponsored murder, loss of humanity, corruption of power. What the movie's really saying: violence doesn't purge society, it corrupts it. Inequality is the root of societal decay, not human nature. Powerful institutions will exploit fear and anger to stay in control. People are not inherently violent, only when driven by desperation or indoctrination. So here's the final takeaway of that. It is a scathing critique of the purge. It frames as a grotesque manipulation of justice designed not to help society but to maintain power by eliminating the vulnerable. So you know what? This is why I like ChatGPT and Common Sense Media, because it brings out all those arguments right there. And depending on who you ask, there's a number of people who will think deeply about that and say, you know what really is, why are people violent, and how abusive can our government really be, and all that stuff. And then there's other people, and to be fair, I do this most of the time, and I debate other people about this. There's a lot of people who just watch it and they turn off their brains and just enjoy mindless entertainment. And that just depends on who you ask. But I think those are some good points with it. And like I said, when I first started watching, when the first Purge movie came out in 2013, me and my friends thought this is boring. I gave the movie like a 3 or 4 at best. But I rewatched it recently and I came out with it thinking, okay, I can bump it up to 6.5. The second film is like 7.5. So that's my take on that. And you tell me what you think about the Purge movie. So pretty soon I'm going to watch Election Year, the third one. I'll give you my review of that. There's a few other movies I'm going to get out the way as well. So stay tuned. I got quite a few horror and slasher films to cover. I got quite a few action thriller films to cover, some drama films, all that stuff. So hit the subscribe button, help me out, help me reach 500 subscribers by the end of the year, and all the links to my socials are in my About section. So that's all I have for now. Stay tuned.